Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, looking back at the Texas Tech Hoops weekend visits, additions, and looking for more additions. And also looking ahead to Joey McGuire's Leaders of the Pack. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And today's episode brought to you by Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends. Let the domination begin today by downloading Monopoly Go for free in the App Store or on Google Play. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you. Kicking off a brand new week. We'll spend a little time today looking back to the weekend that was for Grant McCasland and the Red Raider men's basketball team, and also looking ahead into our football crystal ball as we'll talk about some of the tiers personnel-wise and who we see sort of leading the pack, and then some of those groups beyond that, obviously, as we head into a season with some new faces and new places and just new faces in general that we are yet to get accustomed to. But wanted to start on the hoops front. I know it was a busy weekend, and we'll get to some of those that showed up on campus to visit the program, and also a new addition to the Red Raider men's basketball roster.
Yeah, you know, and we also had a couple of guys find new homes that were part of Demarion Williams goes to High Point. So shout out to Toby Smith. That was his alma mater, and he used to coach there and all those things. So anyway, Demarion Williams ends up at High Point, and then you had Kyron Lindsay end up at Murray State. So, and then I think football-wise, Cam Watts ends up at University of Mexico, but we're talking hoops here. So you had a couple of guys visit over the weekend, I think, and so this is a bit clouded, but like with Trezarian White, it was one of those deals where he was not really in the picture. He was in the picture. Then he released his wish list or top three. You're not on it, and you're kind of like, okay, well, guess not an option for you. And then next thing you know, he's in Lubbock, Texas, and posting his visit. We talked about that late last week. And then you get a commitment from Leon Horner, the third. Okay, Leon Horner. Who is a high school prospect out of a prep school in Dallas that visited late in the season for a home game. I think he may have been there actually for the Central Florida game, which was kind of one of the weirdest home games that you had in the conference schedule. You won it, but it was just kind of one of those games where you just could never pull away, and it wasn't as juiced up of a crowd, and the students weren't. I think the conversation was, do our students have home game fatigue or Saturday home game fatigue? Because there had been like 2 or 3 in a row, and they're like, we don't know who Central Florida is, So,
and then what happens, students? We get to know them very well.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But Leon Horner is a guy that we've touched on this. So in the last week, you added a starting point guard in Elijah Hawkins, and which was needed, desperately needed, a must. And then you've added a Leon Horner. Okay, these are far ends of the spectrum type additions. So let me explain. One is going to be penciled in, penned in, starting point guard, team leader, facilitator, guy we're going to lean on, count on, have to trust, face of the program type player. Leon Horner is going to be he's going to be somebody that you bring along slowly, a developmental type. And I hope nobody feels like that is, a negative, because what he's chosen to do is he's chosen to put himself around people that he knows and he trusts. He's known Kellen Buffington for a long time. And he had several D1 scholarship offers. UTA, Sam Houston were some of the close ones in proximity, both of schools that you play in the non-conference and have over the last several years. And there's good players on those teams. But you can't, if you're Texas Tech, you can't you can't realistically feed all 13 equally and keep them all happy, with the expectation that you're the man, you're going to play, you're going to start, you're going to shine. I mean, there's just not enough minutes. So in this portal era, I think it's very important to have some folks on that you can bring along slowly and grow old with, or try to. And I think, I've seen people say, well, by the time he gets good, he's probably going to transfer to somewhere else. Well, hopefully not, hopefully not. Because you've seen what happened with the freshman group that you brought in 2 years ago. Is Robert Jennings still around? Is Lamar Washington still around? Is Pop Isaac still around? I could keep going, but you get the point.
You don't have to. Please stop.
Yeah. And ideally, you don't want, you don't want, this addition to, you to develop, and then for him to scratch the surface, and then he's elsewhere. That's why I think the relationship component is key here. But if you're him, if you're Leon Horner III, I would rather be at a program that I know that can develop players. Check. I'd rather be in a fun environment where they're going to take care of me. Check. And you're in a high-level competitive environment. Check. And all the things that kind of come with the nutrition, the weight training, all the stuff that Hofstra or UTA or Florida A&M or some of the places that he that he chose Texas Tech over, because this is a scholarship edition now. Mm-hmm. He now makes your 9th scholarship player on your roster. And players like this, sometimes they can surprise you. You may have a feel for, like, man, he's a lot better than I thought. But ideally, he comes in going, I'm going to give a shot at it. And you're saying, hey, you're going to have to work for it. You may be a year or two away, but we want to develop you. We want to be in this relationship. And if you can help immediately, or if you can help at some point when guys go down or whatever it may be, let's do it together. And I think that's why there'll be another edition or two like this too. It would be my guess.
Well, and it's sort of just a foreign thought or something that, as a fan these days, you got to remind yourself can happen, or at least I have to remind myself. Everybody that shows up obviously can be further developed, but in the transfer portal era, I think, again, just speaking personally, you get so accustomed to just only thinking about guys that are immediate impact. Like, what is this guy doing day one? This transfer who's already, kind of long in the tooth or whatever, as far as college basketball is concerned. He's played elsewhere. And so, what once was, I guess, sort of a normal thought to have guys like this on the back end of your roster that you're going to try to bring along. And they haven't gone the way of the dodo bird. They're not extinct, obviously, but it's just nowhere near the forefront anymore, at least for me as a fan, Chris. I don't know how you feel about it, but you got to kind of remind yourself that, yeah, these guys can be brought in and developed and contribute eventually as well. But it is difficult, and I don't know how you protect yourself really at the end of the day. You can try to do all the right things like you were describing there as far as the relationship and what you're doing as a program, and re-recruiting every year is still going to take place. I mean, how do you protect yourself from those guys taking their talents elsewhere whenever they are a little further along the development track? So I don't know, but it is just something that is a little bit different to process as a fan as compared to what the prior non-transfer portal era, I guess, would be.
And that's just why you try to lean on that relationship and trust and years of knowing each other and those kinds of things, and hope that helps you. And it helps you add a player like this for sure. Kellen Buffington, heavily involved in this. Coach McCaslin heavily involved here, because some people may see this cross whatever news source they're looking at, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or one of the websites out there, whatever it may be, and maybe listening to us now or watching us now going, I'm not familiar with who this is. I haven't heard about him. Well, this is a 3-star prospect, but it's somebody that, and keep in mind, in football, what we're describing here is the absolute norm. I don't care how good you are at the high school level. to come into a college football program, especially a Power 5 program, and make an impact immediately is extremely rare. Okay, I don't care how good you are. Micah Hudson is a one of one, and somebody that, you know, over the years, 10 or 15 years, that you kind of have this expectation that he could come in here and not only could he play really, really well, but even then, I'm not expecting him to be your leading receiver. I'm not expecting him to be, you know, all conference or anything. I mean, so what we're describing here is the norm when it comes to football. But basketball, we have been trained to the one and done. We've been trained to, you're looking at what Baylor does when they bring in these freshmen. We're like, well, those guys are getting drafted in the first round of the NBA draft. You know, that's not what we're dealing with Leon Horner, but there's nothing wrong with that. You need some of this on your roster because, again, you're not playing 13 players in a game when it gets to Big 12 play. You may not even be playing 13 players when you're playing, you know, the UTAs before Christmas. Yeah. You know, but you need – we saw how thin it got last year, and I just remember – somebody saying, they'll never catch us again like this. We just don't have any options, any young options, any backup plans, any depth. Never happened, you know, and this is an answer to that.
Well, speaking of some of that and some of those options, I'm like Tyrone Biggums over here, just scratching my neck. Like, you got any more of those, portal commits we can talk about? I guess Osibor and White, Trezarian White, were the visitors or the headline visitors. Any surprises as far as who showed up? And am I just kind of feeling maybe the burden of Grant McCaslin's own success as far as his hit rate whenever you do have a visit and then it's not immediately, you know, a commitment announcement? I'm kind of wondering, it's probably just in my own head, I suppose, as to trying or kind of being a little too urgent with that timeline when you got all kinds of things going on for these guys. But maybe it is, like I said, just a little bit of that burden of your own success and what you've been able to do before, as I'm just checking every hour on the hour. Okay, back to Tyrone Biggums. Where we going to get some more of these?
Yeah, you know, and White is somebody that I think had a good visit, but, you know, there's other options for him. You know, again, it goes back to the conversation we had last week. Is this role? Is this usage, you know, is this NIL? Is this location? Is this scheme? You know, good question. Yeah. On you know, if this is a fit or not a fit. But you know, I mean, Elijah Hawkins did take his visit, and then, you know, a couple of days went by, and then boom, you got your point guard. And so maybe Trezarian White would be the same. But it's also not going to surprise me at all if, you know, there's more visits there for him because he's got other visits scheduled, and it goes back to that NFL free agency, you know, conversation. A lot of times, if they're on your campus, you want to try to get it done before they go elsewhere, because whatever you're offering, whether it's role or, you know, whatever it may be, you know, we can offer you a starting spot or we can offer you whatever it is. That may get topped at the next time they go on a visit. So it's like, oh, that's what they're giving you. Well, we can do this for you, know. That's what you're dealing with. It's
kind of like Once Upon a Time, the story where I think it was the Mavs and I guess Clippers pursuing DeAndre Jordan. They're like locking him in the house, or it's like the Clippers are the ones locking him in the house or something. A wild story. And you kind of feel like going that route every once in a while. But
God, Cowan, you're going way back there. I do remember this.
Oh, I know. And that was I was thinking about that watching some hoops over the weekend, and on Inside the NBA on TNT, they're talking about you know, what can Denver do to find a way to win, as they were beaten in Game 1 by Minnesota. And I think Charles Barkley said something to the effect like, I don't know, maybe even DeAndre Jordan's got to find a way to play a minute or play 5 minutes or whatever. And I'm thinking, once upon a time, they were chaining this guy to like Doc Rivers' living room couch so that he wouldn't go to Dallas. And well, it's just funny how time passes. Okay, time is passing too quickly, so we got to get on to other things. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Whenever one of those commitments does pop, you won't miss it. But let's turn our attention to football before we get out of here. First, today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, and it does it all while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within only 24 hours. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today. Terms and conditions apply. Chris, you're asked traditionally, annually, by various outlets across the country for a read on Texas Tech, and this somewhat in the context of putting together some potential all-conference preseason team lists, first, second, third, whatever it may be. There are various platforms obviously out there to consume, so depending upon what you're taking in, maybe is going to dictate obviously the perspective that you're going to get. But I was kind of interested as you were sharing some of your responses with me as to who was winding up in, say, a first team potential group, or then maybe a second or a third, or some of those that could be lurking in the shadows to possibly surprise. Now, the first name on your list, I was not necessarily surprised by, and I don't think anybody would be surprised by the fact that Taj Brooks is definitely going to be considered one of those leaders of the pack. But I thought it was really interesting, the second name that was on that list and in that potential first team category, and that was Trey McCray. Thinking pretty highly of the guy going into 2024.
Yes, but it's not as a receiver. And I think people forget about these teams when they're put out there. You have various roles. He's a first team all Big 12 kick returner, postseason, preseason, however you want to do it. And he's got the stats to back it up from last year, and the production and all those things. You're talking about the 100-yard return, okay, which puts you on the radar. But I think he had 7 returns over 30 yards, 3 returns over 50 yards. I mean, this is big-time stuff. And in a time where there's not that many returns to be had in this day and age. So I think that's important to note, too, in limited chances. You know, he was flipping the field for you, or putting you. You know, there was positive hidden yardage. Yeah. You know, from the standpoint when Dre McCray was involved, and I think that was a sneaky good part of what your team was last year that probably didn't get talked about enough. But in my responses to these outlets that have asked my opinion on it, I absolutely said right next to Taj Brooks, these are no-brainers. Like these are first-team guys without a doubt. And I stated a lot of the reasons why on my opinion of it. Taj Brooks, what's interesting with him, he's a no-brainer too. However, I bet you see a lot of these outlets put 3 running backs, maybe even more, or somebody's going to get pushed to second team, and it's going to ruffle a lot of feathers because there are, I mean, and I mentioned to you, Ollie Gordon is a no-brainer too, but like somebody like RJ Harvey from, UCF, who's got the numbers to back it up and touchdowns to back it up and over 1,000 yards to back it up. There's something there too, and I'd have to go and look and see if I've missed the 4th or 5th guy, but I just wanted to point that out. But yeah, these are no brainers for all Big 12 for Texas Tech. Now I did plead the case, and this is tricky in this era when you're for an exercise like this, but I really felt pretty strongly about Josh Kelly at being a first-team guy too, or heavy consideration for such things. because this is somebody who at the Power 5 level, just under 1,000 yards last year and a whole bunch of touchdown catches to go with it. The yards per catch. And then I explained to them, he has hit the ground running in the spring. He is one of the most consistent players that they have. He's the guy that whenever it's 3rd and 8, this is where the ball's going in practices and all those kinds of things. So I wanted to and you could keep going, but I felt really strongly about that. It's hard to really fight for an offensive lineman. Like, how do you argue over Davion Carter over somebody else's transfer portal, senior edition? But anyway.
Well, maybe in the sense you just point back to the running back and be like, well, this guy's going to make him look really good, and your running back's not as good, so your guard's not going to be as good. Yeah. Your tackle is not going to be as good. So you cover a couple of different phases there, offensively and then special teams wise. But here's one thing I really like to see as a Texas Tech fan. First, today's episode brought to you by Monopoly Go, and we've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime of the big game, and the scoreboard's not looking too good. You're feeling low. You're not sure you or your team are going to be able to pull out a win, and that's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, it's time to get back in the game and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. And you can do just that with the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go. Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone, anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies and tell them all about it whenever you're kicking their butts. You can also play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with the wrecking ball, or charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go today for free in the App Store or on Google Play. Here's one thing I really like to see as a Texas Tech fan. That is almost an immediate mention right after that of a pair of defensive guys. And right in the middle of your defense, I noticed that you had Ben Roberts and Jacob Rodriguez very high on your list as potential first teamers, maybe second teamers, but either way, leading the pack as well on that side of the football.
I think both should be heavily considered. Ben, 100+ tackles on a variety of different freshman All-American teams. We know the story. Comes in and starts for Oregon, against Oregon, and we're thinking. I remember leading up to that week, going, "It's a hell of a spot to put this kid in, man." I mean,
facing 35-year-old Bo Nix on the other side.
But Bo Nix, Bucky Irving, Troy Franklin out there. They got an NFL tight end. I mean, NFL linemen. They go really fast. They wear the chrome. It's like, oh, our pets' heads are falling off. Hey, young man, you have to play a very cerebral position here. Don't get caught up into paying attention to all the flashy things when that's all that they have. It's just flashy uniforms, flashy players, play calls. You name it, and he crushed it, and never stopped crushing it. So I feel very strongly there. But I'm of the opinion that Jacob Rodriguez is the best player on your defense. My opinion. I think he's going to be the green dot guy. I think that it's hard for me to fight for him in a way when you played in very limited action, last year because of the injury. But I wrote this. This is he's the best player on your defense, and so he's deserving of first and second team, all Big 12 consideration. And so we'll see what happens. But those two guys, that has a chance to be Tony Bradford, Jalen Hutchings, just right behind them. Yeah. I think that duo, ideally, you would hope that they are together all year again next year, and people are like, are these dudes ever going to graduate? Like, I mean, what is going on? That's what my wish list would be, or top of my wish list for those two guys. But yeah, they lead the charge defensively.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned those two guys up front who are now departed. And I was taking a look at your collection of portal additions, and some of those you've already mentioned, one being obviously Josh Kelly. And we talked about some of those offensive linemen as well. But a guy that you had on the list for consideration as well, is one of those that's going to be asked to fill some of those shoes as far as Hutchings and Bradford in the middle. And that's DeBraylon Carroll, the Rice transfer, who's a guy I'm really interested in. And I guess I've kind of slept on sort of up to this point. But, man, some of his highs were really high a season ago as far as the impact that he made. I guess I'm always a little hesitant from, again, a portal standpoint to just immediately insert guy here and boom, starter or regular impact, consistent impact kind of guy. But Tech could obviously use it in that spot as much as really anywhere on either side of the ball as you look to fill some of that production that you will no longer have there. But Carroll's one of the more interesting individuals really on my list as we get nearer to fall camp that I'll be wanting to pay a lot of attention to.
Yeah. And he's somebody that, because he comes in as a senior and he's got some production at Rice, I think he's somebody that's going to come in and hit the ground, obviously running and be a part of the rotation. I don't know if he'll ultimately get the nod on something like this, because you could make the argument from a Texas Tech standpoint, Quincy Ledet maybe deserves some of the same considerations. But how do you separate one the other? DeBraylon Carroll, though, has been a starter and is played a ton of games and got some things to go with it, whereas Quincy Ledet's been part of a rotation because of the guys that we just mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't know which one will emerge or which one will, but I mean, if you're talking preseason, somebody like DeBraylon Carroll probably deserve, you're talking third or fourth team type stuff here.
Sure.
And it's tricky, man, like on an exercise like this, because there's now 16 teams in this deal. There's a lot of players in your conference all of a sudden. And it's pretty fascinating just to kind of like on this exercise. And there's going to be so many different things that I hadn't thought about that, but trying to fill out an all Big 12 team, first, second, third, and fourth team, when you've got a bunch of players that, one, have come into the league that have never played in it before because they're portal additions, or I don't know what Arizona State's got, hadn't been really paying attention. Well, guess what? They're eligible to be selected for such exercise here. So it's just pretty. It's kind of an in-your-face moment on, oh yeah, we expanded by a lot, and all those things. So this was a difficult exercise.
I know one of the things that Coach McGuire has talked about and Coach DeRuiter has talked about this offseason, going back to the defensive front for a moment, is the being encouraged by the thought of those guys up front not having to play as many snaps as Bradford and Hutchings were at one point in time. And obviously you're always hoping to have a good rotation there, but is Carroll a positive impact only if he's a starter? Is he coming in and they're thinking, just give us a good rotation piece? Or how do you kind of gauge success for a guy like that whenever you do have so many others, Ledet and others, who have never had to have been those primary guys just yet? And we are talking about a guy who was a starter in his previous spot. So where do you kind of think the standard of success would be for someone like him in 24?
It's the latter part of what you said. Solid rotation piece. This is what you brought him in to do. You didn't bring him in to be if it turned out, that's great.
Yeah.
Don't think the expectation was that he was going to come in here and start and shine and lead you, but you want him as a good quality piece to your room. So you've got depth. He can shine. But I don't want anybody to get an unrealistic opinion of what he can do, for you, and I think those kinds of things. So it's just, yeah. I mean, you want to make him, have him come in here and be a quality player for you and all those things. But I think if we're talking about him as far as, hey, dude, come in and we're going to give you the baton, you're gonna be the face of this, or. I just think that's a bit overstating it, but solid rotation piece, somebody that plays a third or half of the snaps on the interior of the defensive line and does it well. Yeah, I think you're winning. That's exactly what you've needed and asked for.
He's just someone that's difficult literally and figuratively to be ignored. You're not throwing just a ton of 300-pounders in the mix year after year after year, and he's got some of that size. Before we get out of here really quickly, though, I wanted to mention this other guy, speaking of Arizona State, and he's someone who's kind of, I guess, been slept on through the spring because he wasn't a full-fledged participant, but that's Jalen Conyers, a tight end guy that people feel like has got some NFL to him, possibly as a prospect, and somebody that definitely, I think, if he's able to be healthy and remain that way in the fall, he may be someone that just finds himself on a first or second team list after the season is done, if he can make the kind of impact that some believe he can.
And his biggest problem may be the one that he missed the spring, so he's just a bit late catching up. But two, he's at a really deep position room, so he may not get to shine as much as it takes to be a postseason All Big 12 guy. That's not a problem for Texas Tech. It won't be a problem for Jalen Conyers, but just want to point that out. But you know that goes with Mason Tharp and J.C. Miller. But Jalen has got some things on his resume that would suggest to you that he deserves some conversation as far as these exercises on preseason All Big 12 type teams, because he's done it at two different places. I think, tight ends are, not everybody, utilizes one, but you've got some that have put some things on their resume at previous stops. I go back to this won't necessarily help him get the nod at the tight end spot on the first, second, third, or fourth team All Big 12 preseason team. But I just think every time we talk about this kid, I think it's important to note he was their Wildcat quarterback at Arizona State. I mean, he's the run, bringing the guy in motion, and then this, here we come with the fake jet sweep. Handoff, give it, pull it, whatever. No, and then away I go. He's like 255. He's like 6'4", and this gives you an idea of the athleticism. Did he also not participate in that dunk contest at the arena?
Right.
Just saying, this is good stuff here. So. And it's hard to, like, when you're arguing for a guy, well, he can dunk a basketball. Well, he played a little Wildcat QB. Well, no, this is for tight end. I get it, but I'm just trying to give you context. So that's what we're doing here. But that's why I think that he belongs in this conversation.
It could be plenty of guys that are dunking a basketball. I don't know if they're all doing it at 255, 260 though. So yeah, the athleticism is something to marvel at, and hopefully we get to see that make a big impact on the gridiron in the fall, as maybe he's, catching a pass for a touchdown and then slamming it home over the upright, something along those lines. Shout out to Tony Gonzalez. Chris, appreciate the time and the insight here today. We're keeping our eyes peeled, of course, as far as the Hoops portal is concerned. So stay with us throughout the week and make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you miss nothing. Chris, we'll see you for the next round tomorrow, man. Enjoyed it.
Keep the hope alive, people. And, maybe somebody will scratch that itch for Cowan and other folks out there at some point very, very soon. We shall see. Don't know. But keep hope alive. Enjoy your Monday. Get through it as best you can. We'll be here tomorrow. And, anyway, it's – again, now we're a week into May. Mother's Day is coming up this weekend. Don't forget about
need a reminder.
Don't forget about that, people. You got a little lead time. More public service announcement there
That's
for
right.
you. But we'll all get through it together.
We appreciate you guys being out there, moms or otherwise, and hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.